Hello, welcome to the Growing Design podcast, where we help you grow your design agency. If you want to learn how to price your services, how to sell your expertise, and how to attract the right type of clients, you've come to the right place. I'm your host, Ed Orozco. Let's get started. Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Growing Design. Today we are with Laura Khalil, and she has a ton of experience on a lot of things that are very relevant to this podcast. So I'm very happy to have her on. Thank you, Laura, for accepting to come on the podcast. And why don't you introduce yourself very quickly for the audience, what you do, and yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So, I have a lot of experience running my own agency, which I've been doing since 2013. And in that time, and by the way, just so the audience knows, I'm not a designer, but I've worked with tons of designers in my work, and I've worked in sort of creative direction roles, advising for companies like Intel, GE, Twitter, Intuit, and many more on how to tell great stories through content, and that includes design. And so I'm excited to talk to you today about some of what I've learned along the way and how to be successful, especially if you have an agency or you are on your own trying to freelance. We'll talk about that.
Awesome. All right. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience starting a marketing consultancy? How first of all, why did you start it? Like, what
Mhm.
was sort of like your prompt to
Mhm.
start your own marketing consultancy, and what your experience was like at the beginning?
So I started my own marketing consultancy because I was collecting what I like to call an unofficial PhD in getting laid off. And I mean, I'm just going to be real with you, Ed. I could not keep a job. Part of the problem was, especially as a woman living and working in Silicon Valley, I had a lot of challenges in a male dominated industry being an individual contributor. And, my parents are both immigrants. And when they came to the United States, they always said, Laura, the way to make it is to work really hard, to act like you're a leader, and then people will accept that you're a leader and you'll get promoted, you'll get more responsibilities. But that didn't really happen for me. In fact, very often my boldness, my desire to sort of like uh, just my personality and who I am, those very core pieces of who I am, were really misunderstood as an individual contributor. And so in 2013, I got laid off yet again. And I had this moment where I really said to myself, I can see the future and I can see if I do this again, if I go and I try to get a full time job again, this is the path that I will continue to go down because I've been going down that path for 6 years. And I said, that definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I'm feeling insane. So and I say this to everyone who feels frustrated with anything in your life, you're the common denominator in your experience. And so the only thing I can do, because I can't change myself and the core personality traits of who I am, those are not going anywhere, but I can change who I surround myself with. And so I literally got laid off on a Friday morning. Friday afternoon, I'm building a website. I'm just trying to create a presence for myself. I'm throwing up logos of everyone I've worked with. And within 6 weeks of doing that, I gained my first Fortune 100 client. That was Intel. Then I got GE. Then I got Twitter. Then I got Intuit. And so for me, it happened really quickly. And I realized it happened for me pretty quickly. One, because I actually knew what I was doing and I was pretty good at my job. Like most people who are listening to this, you're probably very accomplished at what you're doing. You just need the right people to notice you. You need to get into the right rooms. I think sometimes we really can undervalue ourselves because we think, oh, I'm not appreciated for my job. That's not necessarily true. You're just not in the right room. You're not talking to the right people. And for me, when I talk about personality and I have this like really bold, outgoing personality, I just realized when I was working full time, I was doing a future job in a present role. And nobody is going to appreciate you if you're trying to become something that they don't want today. So I had to really take the reins and assume that and say, no, you're a leader. You're a badass. You're going to run your own company. And I did. So that's how it started.
That's an awesome story. I imagine the white folk in San Francisco didn't really like your attitude. Um,
I think they were
the
scared of me, which I don't understand why, but my consulting clients just adored me, and they adored me for the same traits that penalized me as a full-time employee. Those became my greatest assets as a leader. And I want everyone listening to remember this. When you go in as a consultant and immediately think of yourself as a consultant. Just if anyone is listening and they call themselves a freelancer, let's just make a reframe here right now and say you're a consultant. Why? Consultants are experts. And I know you're an expert at what you do. When you go in as a consultant, you're there to solve problems. And maybe you'll solve problems through design. But if you can show the client, I'm here to solve a problem for you rather than I'm just a hired hand to make an Instagram graphic for you, that's going to separate you from charging, I don't know, $100 for that to $5,000 for that. That's part of the difference is you need to make the shift of I solve problems. I am not just a hired gun because you can go find a hired gun on Fiverr or freelance.com or any of those sites. You have to really expand your vision uh, and show the client what's possible. That's how you get paid.
I love that. Yeah, what happens a lot is that people actually think that they have to compete with those like sort of, I call them the bottom feeders, which is a little maybe inappropriate,
It's not
but
the nicest name, but yeah,
it's not but yeah, it's like it's gonna be really hard for you to compete with people in a price war, because
yeah,
you're always gonna be you cannot out compete them on price because they have lower cost,
mhm,
because for whatever reason they are willing to charge as little as possible. And the type of clients they attract with lower prices are not the type of clients that you want to attract.
yeah,
You are offering something else. You're not offering templates. You're not offering predetermined cookie cutter
exactly.
solutions. You're offering your thinking, which is a lot more valuable. And it's something that you actually can charge for a lot more handsomely than, if you're just selling a Fiverr logo design. Um,
Exactly.
cool. So, all right. So you started your own marketing agency. You started to land these clients.
Yeah.
Did you at any point feel like the classic imposter syndrome at the
Yeah.
beginning?
Yeah,
How did
definitely.
you
I
overcome that?
so one of the things I like to say about imposter syndrome is forget about faking it until you make it. Okay, we're all scared. Everyone's scared. And I work with a lot of leaders in industry today. And guess what? They have imposter syndrome too. People, you don't outgrow it even if you move up the ladder. Everyone has it to some degree. Unless, of course, you're a sociopath. And that's legit. If you're a sociopath and you have no fear of anything, then you don't have imposter syndrome. But most people are not sociopaths. So I remember very clearly, I, I had left that job. I was on unemployment. I'm trying to figure out how to get this marketing thing off the ground. So I built this website. I, had business cards. And I found this agency who wanted to subcontract work out. So I got really prepared. I always do proposals for all of anyone I'm meeting. I have a PowerPoint or a keynote presentation to show who I am because that builds instant authority. And so I go with my proposal. I'm meeting them at a coffee shop and I'm scared. I'm really scared. And I feel like I'm kind of like a little bit like shaky and stuff. And I'm like, Laura, you know this, just go in. So, and I did, and I gave my proposal and I talked to them. And I remember, and this is what I'll say about imposter syndrome. Don't fake it until you make it. Face it until you make it. Keep saying, I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway. I'm shaking like a leaf and I'm going to walk in there and give it my best anyhow. I'm going to keep facing the fear. I'm not going to run from it. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to self sabotage. And if I do self sabotage, I'm going to recognize when I'm self sabotaging. A classic form of self sabotage, Ed, is people will have a really important presentation or client meeting tomorrow morning. So what do I do tonight? I go hit the bar and I get drunk. Or I have like some giant meal and I'm like bloated and tired and exhausted and hung over the next morning and I'm not my best. And so then we go into the meeting looking like and feeling like a train wreck and acting like a train wreck. And then we say, well, of course I didn't get it. I mean, I wasn't going to get it anyway. That's self sabotage. Don't do that stuff. Set yourself up for success. Or if you are nervous the night before a big meeting, do some meditation instead of drinking or instead of, smoking tons of weed or things that are not going to prepare you to be successful the next day. Get an app that can help you meditate, help you calm down, help you breathe through it. Do things that are more resourceful because you want to leave a really good impression with people when you meet them. And that's how I did it. And yeah, I was scared.
Yeah, I really love what you said about face it until you make it.
Yeah.
I read somewhere, and I don't remember where, but it said, do it scared. Like,
Yeah.
most important things or most things worth doing are going to scare you. So do them anyway,
Yeah.
do them scared, and then, until you get used to it.
And it gets
Um,
better. And it gets easier the more you do this stuff. And I will say, I've had tons of clients say no to me. I've had tons of people say, I can't afford that. I don't want to work with that. Or they just ghost or ignore. That happens to all of us. It's not like totally unusual. Take those as learning experiences to say, okay, what did I learn from that? What can I take forward? So, and I say that because I've gone through it. Anyone in business will go through a lot of rejection. And I kept learning from it and learning from it and learning from it. And after a number of years, I found myself in the boardroom of one of the biggest companies of the world, literally singing for my supper, trying to get my contract extended. And I was there with the executives, and was I scared? Yes, I was scared. But I said, Laura, you have been preparing for this moment for the last 5 years because every no, every challenge you've had with a client, everything has brought you and prepared you to make you a better presenter, to make you a better speaker, to make you more eloquent, to speak in front of this group of people. I did, and I got the contract. And so I'm just saying, take everything that happens, it's not in your way, it's on your way. Treat it as such, treat it as a learning experience.
so what do you think was, or what did you start doing in those early days
Mm.
to sort of scale your agency, like to keep growing, to get all of these amazing clients that you work with? Were you trying to, I don't know, get speaking gigs? Were you trying to run Facebook ads? Like, how did you
No.
manage to get those big clients?
So to be honest with you, I think sometimes we really overcomplicate this stuff. What you really need to do, yes, you need to have a brand, and yes, personal branding is important. Make sure your LinkedIn is updated. Make sure you have a website. It does not need to be crazy complicated. My website was very simple, but I took it as simple means elegant. Simple means like chic. That's how I kind of tried to portray it because I'm not a designer. I'm not going to, make it super fancy because I can't. So you need those basics, absolutely, because the first thing people are going to do when they hear about you is they're going to Google you. What's your LinkedIn look like? What's your website look like? What's on your Twitter? That type of thing. So you need to have your house in order. People get into, especially big corporate jobs and corporate gigs like this. A lot of it is going to be through who you know. The most important thing, and it's not going to be through, nobody at Intel is reading Facebook ads. looking to hire you. I guarantee it, they're not doing it, okay? Nobody at any big company is sitting there, gee, I need to find a marketer. Let me go to a Facebook ad. No. What they're doing is they're relying on their network. They're saying, who do you know? They're talking to people they know. The best thing that anyone can do is develop a list of people you know who are either people who would hire you or people who are adjacent to those who make hiring decisions. Do informal coffee chats. Do, hey, I'm doing a little monthly meetup on Zoom, or I'm doing a monthly meetup in person. Why don't you come? It's not a sales event. It's a get to know you event. It's a keep yourself top of mind event. People get very, very, very distracted by all of this online marketing stuff. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do the online marketing path. That certainly works for some people, especially if you're looking for, smaller clients. But a lot of this stuff is relationships and it's word of mouth. And the reason I didn't have to do any of that really is because people knew who I was. And your work will speak for yourself and you will get booked up. But so I'll give you an example. Right now, I do a lot of podcast consulting. That's where my business is primarily today. So, do I go to companies right now and just try to find like someone in the podcast world? That's kind of hard to search for. So, what do we want to look for? Well, who would someone at a big company work with to run a podcast? They'd probably want to work with ad agencies. They'd probably ask other creatives in their industry, who do you know who does this? So, the first thing I do is go network with those people so that you can become the referral for them, right? That's how you do this. It's a lot easier than creating, and I'm not saying don't create freebies and don't do that. That's all useful if that's what your business needs, but it can also be a lot simpler than that, with sort of relationship marketing, really getting to know people. Remember, this is how we did things, and I mean, I might be the only one listening to this who's old enough to remember life before the internet. But this is how we did things before we had the internet. We actually talked to people, and you can do really, really well by just talking to people.
So you mentioned something that I think is very important, which is the big guys in the big companies are not on Facebook and hanging out on LinkedIn all day. They are very busy people, and
Yeah,
also they have a lot of risk that they have to manage. So they cannot afford hiring a total stranger to execute a 50K, 100K plus
right.
project. So they wanna hire someone that has a referral. Like,
Hmm.
think about the last thing that was expensive that you bought. You probably did a lot of research by asking your friends or watching reviews on YouTube or whatever it was, because you trust people who have had the first-hand experience.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, it's very, very powerful. And then yeah, the younger millennials forget that before the internet, we didn't have Facebook ads, we didn't have
Yeah.
Google ads, so on and so forth. So that's I really love that part. Um,
I
so
actually,
I
and Ed, let me ask this
uh-huh.
to the audience. Let me just pose this question to the audience. When was the last time you bought anything off of a Facebook ad? You tell me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even remember and I'm not saying they're not effective. I'm saying that's not where most people are looking to hire a service provider. Um, that's just not, unless you have an extremely niche product that immediately solves a burning problem I have right now. I am not going to, why would I hire you that way? I'm going to go talk to people I know. I'm going to go talk to my creatives. I'm going to go talk to my agency friends before I go to a Facebook ad.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I do buy little things here and
Hmm.
there off of Instagram, but they're usually like, oh, I'm gonna buy a Lightroom preset for like $5, or
Right.
I'm gonna buy this oh, these winter socks look very cute. I'm gonna
Yeah.
buy them for like,
Yeah,
that's it.
totally.
Like I never bought like something expensive out of ads.
Right. And so here is a strategy that you could use. I'm going to buy a Lightroom preset. Great. Let's say someone listening to that sells Lightroom presets. Awesome. Now you've got them on your list. They've already purchased something for you for $5. Great. Now you can nurture that. You can take them down the funnel, see where they go if that's the type of business you want to run. Um, but you can't get people in and say, "Hey, I'm a designer. I charge $150 an hour. Uh, you need me?" They're going to be like, "No, no, I don't."
Y- Yeah, exactly. Also, like it's gonna be hard for someone to trust you if
Yeah.
because here's the thing about when you connect with people so quick as like in ads or
Hmm.
as in like when you do outbound strategy, you don't have time to build the trust that's required for people to hire you for big projects. So that's, I think, the number one thing, other than sometimes people overdo it and it's a little annoying.
Hmm.
But the main issue is that you don't really have the time, they don't have the time to get to know you, so you don't really
Exactly.
have the time to sell your credentials.
People will always pay you according to the trust that you've earned with them.
Oh wow,
That's
that's so
how
quotable.
yeah. People will always pay you according to the trust you've earned with them. So that's why we can sell cheap products through ads because it does. And that's why, like many of you who have listened, you might have seen these $27, $37 offers online. This has become like the new hot thing because it's relatively inexpensive. It solves a burning desire. And it's an easy way to get your foot in the door. But if you're trying to sell a $50,000 or $100,000 or multi-year or retainer package with a client, it's not going to be that way. It's going to be because they know you, they like you, they trust you, they've seen your stuff online. It is super important to be branded online. It is super important to have podcasts like this, to be creating content. And I also want to say something as we're talking about this, because sometimes people can get really annoyed or discouraged with podcasting or with content marketing, which is really my area of expertise. When we're doing content marketing for personal branding, please, everyone, hear me on this. It can take 2 to 3 years for people to associate you with what you do. This is not the quick game. This is the long game. And you've got to say, do I love this? Is whatever I'm doing in my life with my career enough of a sustainable interest that I could do it for the next 10 years? Because it's going to take a while for people to say, "Oh yeah, that's what she's up to or that's what he's up to." It just takes time and it takes years. So this isn't a quick, I wish it could be like a quick thing where everyone knew who you were. It just takes a lot of time. Brene Brown, who most people today know, talking about shame, she was researching shame for 20 years before she got on a TED Talk stage. That's how long it took her to get up there, It takes time. Are you in it for the long haul? Are you in it for a quick buck? They're kind of different things.
Yeah, definitely stay clear from the transactional mindset, because these are not things. First of all, if you hate doing it, don't do it,
Don't do it.
because you're not gonna stick to it. Like you're just gonna suffer all the time, and you're not gonna wanna. You're gonna dread the moment in which you have to sit down and record or write that article or post that video.
Yeah.
So find the things that you enjoy doing and stick to those. Double down on those. And then I like this quote from Naval Ravikant, which said it's something like, "Be impatient with the actions and be patient with the results."
Mm,
I
very
really
good.
like that one.
Yep.
Um, all right, so I want to talk a little bit about effective communication.
Yeah.
I think effective communication is one of the most powerful tools in a designer or creative
Yeah.
people arsenal. Can you tell us a little bit about what do you consider effective communication, and how can someone develop that sort of skill?
Effective communication is clear, unambiguous communication where, especially within the business world, we have a clear and shared upon understanding of the obligations, the expectations, and how to communicate with the client. Most people are very scared of conflict, are very scared, and they just want the job so bad that they're like, yeah, 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 okay, whatever you want, we'll do it. Please, 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 you live and die by the statement of work and contract you sign with your clients. It must be clear. What exactly are you going to be doing? This is going to help in a number of ways. First, it's going to help with scope creep. When a client comes to you and says, "Oh, could let's just, I'll use this as a simple example. They've contracted you to do 5 graphics a month. Great. Okay. What happens when the client comes to you and says, "Hey, could you do a few more?" Well, if you don't have that clearly labeled and written out in the contract, what do you do if there's more work? Then people kind of feel like they're getting trampled on, they're getting used, they don't want to lose the client. Instead, we can always go back to the contract and say, no problem, I can do that. And we have a billing procedure for what happens when we go out of scope. So that's all written in, it's pre-agreed to, it's pre-signed, we don't need to think about it. Or if we need to make an addendum to the contract, that's easy to do. It's not a big deal because it's not in there. We don't start arguing about scopes of work because the scopes of work are unclear. By the way, that is your responsibility as a business owner to make that clear. That is not the client's responsibility. That is on you to say, am I crystal clear on what is included in here? What I like to do with my clients, I like a weekly check-in, especially when we're doing creative. Make sure you're on their schedule. We look at creative. This is what I did with one of my clients, one of my really big clients. We looked at creative every single week. We presented new ideas every single week. We had a structure around that. Why do we have a structure? Because nobody wants a fire drill. And I am not interested in working with people who want to work in a fire drill environment. In fact, kind of none of us want to work that way. So if we build in guardrails and we say, oh, you have some requests, great, let's talk about them at our Tuesday morning meeting. No problem. We are building in guardrails to protect your time. Similarly, also recommend don't work in fire drills. If a client comes to you and says, oh my God, I need this done right now, this is such an emergency, you may, as goodwill, say, okay, I'll give you this one. Then you say, but I want to refer back to the contract. I just want you to know, we need a week or 5 business days to get stuff done. We're going to give you this one for free. If you can, we're going to give you this one. Okay, we'll do this for you once. But I just want you to know, this is an exception. So that's what clear communication is. It's really clearly stating your boundaries. It's clearly stating how you work. And people get scared of this stuff, but to be honest with you, this is how you build great working relationships. This is how you build healthy communication, is by being clear on what our expectations are. Most people get pissed off when their expectations aren't met, and they're not met because they're not communicated. So get
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah, you just made me think of something that I think it's important to include in contracts, which is when can the client contact you, and
Right.
how. This has to
Mm-hmm.
be specified in a contract. If you're gonna share your personal phone number with your client, so that they can text you at 3 in the morning on a Sunday, to get something done for like 7 a.m., that should be in the contract, and you need to leave it very clear that you do not work over weekends, you do not work
Right.
after 6 or 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you do, whatever it
Whatever
is,
you
make
do.
sure it's
Yeah.
in the contract. Yeah, make it work for you and make it very clear. And the first time the client sort of like tries to like circumvent those terms, make it very clear that that's not how you roll,
Mm-hmm.
and they're actually going to respect you for that instead of getting mad at you. They're going to get mad at you when when you give them something that they were not expecting. But if
Right.
everything is laid out very clearly, they're actually going to you're actually going to build more trust, because they're going to be like, oh, this guy or this girl, they know what they're doing, they're very
Yeah.
clear, they're very professional. I'm good. And you increase the trust, which is vital when you're working with any sort of client.
Yeah.
um
Totally.
okay.
Actually, and let me tell you something, Ed.
Uh-huh.
Here's how I have been obviously working since 2013 for myself, so 8 years. I have not had a lousy client in 8 years, and I'm gonna tell you one way that we avoid nightmare clients. You can see them coming from a mile away. Tell me you know this. You can see them. They are already a nightmare before you sign the contract. And I have had people, and this happened to me recently. I had a potential client, a lot of money, contacting me at 10 p.m., wanting to talk for hours, wanting to meet constantly in person before we had a signed contract, all kinds of stuff that for me is a major, major, major red flag. And I had to say, I'm sorry, I'm booked up. I can't take this work because I will not work with people like that. That's how you avoid nightmares. You can often identify, listen to your intuition. When you get that sense of, oh gosh, is this going to be okay? It's not going to be okay. They're going to be worse because then they've got you on the hook with money, right? It's just a nightmare. Just don't do it. Something better will come.
There's a lot of things to unpack from what you just said. The first is the terms. So
Yeah.
make sure you have very clear terms. This is the type of client I work with, and have a criteria. It doesn't have to be public, but have a
Yeah.
criteria of what you consider a bad client. I actually
Yeah.
have a free template on my website, and I constantly update it with things that I hear. I recommend that you have your own based on your own experience. What are the things
Mhm.
that you do not tolerate and that are really that really put you off? Have a list of
Absolutely.
that, and every single client, run them through the list, and if they hit, of they if they tick 3, 4, 5 boxes, that's a warning. You
Yeah.
don't work with them because you're going to regret it. The other thing is sometimes those clients pay a lot and pay on time. So it becomes a problem of like golden handcuffs when they're treating you poorly, they're totally ignoring your terms and your contract, they're overworking you, but they're paying you, so you don't want to leave them.
Right.
That's a terrible situation to be in, and you have to make sure you're in a position to say no and to walk away. Otherwise, they're going to keep exploiting you, and just because they have the money, they think they can control you and they think that they can dictate all the terms. That's another thing
Yeah.
you mentioned. And the last thing I just want to mention, and then we can move on, is don't operate from fear and from a position of hunger. Like, be prepared to walk away if you have to, because otherwise you're gonna regret it. Like, yeah, you might win the contract and you might get the money, but you're gonna have a terrible experience. The client is gonna hate you. You're gonna hate
Yeah.
the client, and that's gonna generate shitty work that you're not gonna be able to put on your portfolio. So it's a lose
Exactly.
lose
It
situation.
rarely works. And I do empathize with people who say, I need to eat next month. And that, sometimes I get it. But how does it, and to your point, Ed, I love that you have a checklist about this because one of the things I always say is when I have an initial call with someone and we're just getting to know one another, the first question I ask myself after I get off the phone is, did I feel energized by them or drained by them? I want to work with people who energize me, who excite me, and I know what that is for me. That's different for everyone. So if they drain me, if I feel exhausted, I'm not going to work with them. For me, it's that simple. If they energize me, if I feel like, oh my God, I'm so excited by what they're doing, then it's a really good sign.
Yeah, they usually tend to be very pushy. Like the bad ones, they want
Hmm.
you to start working before signing. They want you to
Yes.
start doing stuff before paying you. They start asking for stuff. It's like, okay, I cannot start for the next 2 weeks. Oh, you have to start tomorrow because we have this huge deadline.
Yeah.
So flash news, it's never that urgent. Like
No.
90% of the time, it's bullshit. Like they don't have that terrible deadline, and deadlines you can move them. And how do you know? Because once you start the project, they keep stretching the project and adding more scope and making you do more stuff. So they didn't really have that very important deadline. Um, all right, I think we already left that pretty clear.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit of verbal self-defense.
Hmm.
I love this concept. How can you like use language to
Yeah.
portray yourself as a confident person and avoid abusive people, whether that's your boss, your client, or whoever?
So I think it's really important to say that we are all going to be in situations, and we have all been in situations where someone has said something really inappropriate or mean or rude, and we have not known how to respond. And typically, what happens in those moments is we can feel like hot, tingly, our heart is racing, we're starting to sweat, we just want to get out of the room. This is where verbal self defense comes in, because what's happening when we feel really offended by someone and it's shocking to us is it triggers that fight or flight response. And when you trigger the fight or flight response, you can't think clearly and you can't respond. The problem with all of that is that when we don't respond to things that we find offensive, let's say you're in a client meeting and the client says, "This is garbage." And you're just like, "What?" Like, I don't even know what to say to that. When we don't respond, it tells them that they're right. It tells them you can say that and you can up it the next time. And you can even be ruder to me the next time because I'm not pushing back. Okay. So instead of just taking it, here's the one thing I want you to do: ask a question about what they just said. You don't need to even, here's some question. Someone says, "This is trash." And you're like, "What?" You respond and you say, "What do you mean by that? Tell me more." "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I'm sorry, trash?" You're just going to ask, and just, it can be any, "What do you mean? What did you just say?" You're going to just ask the question back. What we're doing at that point is we're taking their language and we're putting it back on them. We're not justifying it with a response, because there is no response to things that are egregious, rude. It's saying, you think about what you said, or you elaborate on what you just said, and you help me understand. And that buys you time to calm down, or it buys you time to say, "Excuse me, I need to take a 20-minute break. And actually, let's regroup in a few minutes." So that is what we do in verbal self defense. Now, sometimes clients will say that, like I've worked with a lot of clients who will look at creative and they'll be very frank with me, because often I'm the buffer between the creative and the client, right? So they can sort of be a little bit more honest with me. But if you feel like you're in a scenario like that where the client says, "Well, I just don't like this at all," or this like is really not good," you have to separate yourself and your worth as an individual on this planet from somebody not liking something you do. Okay, those are two separate things. So, Ed, you and I are talking, I've got pink hair. Guess what? A lot of people don't like pink hair. Do I care? No. Why? Because this is about me. It's not about them, right? So when we have creative and people don't like it, do I care? I care because they're the client, but it doesn't affect me personally. I say, "Great, my job here is to remove my ego from the situation and to provide you with the best quality graphic we can provide based on your feedback." So that's separate. We're not That's not about me. It's not about the designer being crappy. It's about, what don't you like? Tell me more. You have to get curious in those points. Remove your ego, remove your feelings. It has nothing to do with you. And that's where I think a lot of designers, frankly, it can be very hard to hear some of that stuff. But it's really important that you learn to get curious when the client says something like that, because we need to understand how to please them. Because sometimes it's just like a small tweak. Sometimes, it's just, we want you to move things around or try this or that. And it's not about you, you know?
Yeah, it's taste is very subjective. It's
Yes,
probably the most subjective thing ever. And otherwise there wouldn't be, different choices for the same product
totally.
in the supermarket. Cars would come all in this in a single color. Whatever. Like how many
Right.
Jordans exist? How many,
Totally.
taste is the most subjective thing ever. So if a client doesn't like something, it's don't take it personally.
Oh,
Try to ask more clarifying questions, and that's going to force them to articulate what probably was an emotional response,
right.
and then they're going to give you more quality feedback.
Now,
So,
sometimes clients can have, and I know designers love to joke about this. Clients will say things like, "Well, I just don't like it. Can you just like?" And you're like, "What? What don't you like? What are you talking about?" And a lot of times, clients, especially who are not designers, can give this very ambiguous feedback. So one of the things I always said to my clients who say, "Well, I don't like the style of this," I'd say, "Show me something you do like. Give me a sense for things like show me other ads, show me even interiors, show me icons, show me things that like you really love because I can't read your mind." And we can then create sort of like a little board of like this is the style the client's looking for. Hopefully it's identified and unified with their brand, and then we can work off of that. But sometimes they show me what you do like because that can sometimes be a lot easier for them. And that's not to suggest that we copy things or that we, do copycat stuff. In fact, I'll tell you a really funny story, if I may.
yeah,
So
of
we were
course.
we were doing I was doing working doing creative direction for one of my clients, being the intermediary between the designer, and I would come up with concepts. And anyway, so we come up with one of these concepts, and we were doing a lot of jokes for social media, and we would have a graphic associated. I cannot remember what the joke was, but we put it out there with this graphic. A couple months go by, and we see that one of the biggest uh, software manufacturers in the world, who I will not name, had literally copied the graphic and the joke and put it on their social. And they had actually cut our logo out of it. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me right now? What are you doing? And so sometimes imitation is the greatest form of flattery, but that's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Don't verbatim copy, just use it as design inspiration.
Yeah, that's plagiarism,
Yes.
uh, and that's not cool. Don't do that. I wanted to mention something quickly there as well. It's not the client's job to know how to talk about design because they hire you. If they
Hmm.
knew design, they wouldn't hire you. So you need to learn your lines. You need to know how to describe something with the actual specific terms so that you can help the client articulate what they're feeling, as opposed, instead of giving you things like, oh, I just don't feel it. It's not, I like,
Ed is dropping truth bombs. Yes. No, but I mean, but Ed, this is really the difference between being a Fiverr kind of hired gun and seeing yourself as a design consultant. You really assume that role of I'm a professional. I know how to communicate. I realize I'm here to help the client achieve their goals and dreams, and I'm going to be paid really handsomely for doing it. But part of it is assuming some responsibility in helping the client get to the end goal.
absolutely. So in that line, when you said this is how you differentiate yourself from the Fivers, and we're really destroying Fiverr today, but I'm sorry. Sorry, but not sorry. Um, how did you separate yourself from that type of market so that you can charge more? Like, what are the factors?
I didn't even consider Fiverr. I didn't even think that was serious. Like I just that wasn't even on my radar. So like if that's on your radar is not wide enough. It's like you got to really expand your way of thinking. So one of the things that I recommend, there's a couple things. First of all, let me try to use this analogy of you need to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and who have done what you want to do. The most important thing for any person, and if you're an entrepreneur, great. If you're not an entrepreneur, great. It doesn't matter. Any person, who wants to achieve anything in life is to meet someone who has done something similar to what you want to do and have them mentor you, take their programs, take their courses, work one on one with them, whatever it is. Because right when we start consulting, I want you to imagine you are at the ground floor of a building, you're in the lobby. And what do you see if you're in the lobby? Well, you look around and you kind of, you see the sidewalk outside, you see the entryway to another building, you see a bunch of people walking around. What people who are smarter than you are going to do is they're going to show you how to get into the elevator. They're going to show you how to rise. And when you rise in a high rise building, what happens? Your vision expands and you see something completely different from when you're on the ground floor. You're not looking at people walking down the street, scurrying around and cars everywhere. You're actually seeing for, miles or kilometers out in front of you. You're seeing the sky. You're seeing how much is out there for you. So find people who are smarter than you, who have done what you want to do. If you are surrounding yourself with people who are on Fiverr, because like all you and your buddies are on Fiverr, go find someone who isn't doing that. Go find someone who's working with big clients or who's doing whatever it is you want to do and start learning from them. There is so much free content right now on the internet, or so much easy way to get started with that without immediately plunking down a lot of money. Remember, we said you pay people in proportion to the how much you trust them. So learn about new people, go get their content. If it resonates with you, you'll build trust, you'll get to know them better. But that's really what you need to do. I've never considered I'm competing with people on Fiverr. Like that's not even like I mean, to me that's like crazy. Like why would I compete? We're not even solving the same problems.
Yeah, stop walking like staring at the floor and start walking looking up.
Yeah.
Compare yourself to a different type of market. Do you have any tips on on charging more first of all, and like
Hmm.
what are the things? Because I feel like sometimes how much you charge is also sort of like a limiting belief.
Yeah,
Thinking
totally.
it's also like a self confidence
Yeah.
thing, but it also sometimes depends on the market you're in,
Hmm.
how wealthy your clients are, and how important is the problem that you're solving,
Correct.
right?
Yes, absolutely. Those are all factors in what you charge. Um, you're not going to charge an individual the same thing as you're going to charge a Fortune 100 company. Period. You're just like it's just very very different. So you have to one recognize those things. I will give you a little fun little test that anyone can take and use today. If you start giving your prices to people and nobody second guesses them and just pays them, you're undercharging. It's that simple. If people start questioning and saying, "Hey, can you help me understand this?" then we're on the right track, okay? We want to hear like they want to understand the value in this. And yeah, they'll probably pay for it. But um if you're never getting that pushback, you're not charging enough. I'll tell you a funny story. So when I first started consulting, I had no idea what to charge. I knew I only wanted to work with big companies. And so I got on a call to do a content strategy for a really big company. And they said at the end, "What would you charge for this?" Of course, that's every consultant's worst nightmare, right? Because you're like, well, what do you want to pay for it? And so I, thinking, oh, well, I'm going to give them a big number. I threw out the number of $15,000. I thought that was a lot of money. And I'll never forget this guy said to me, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" I said, "Oh, yeah, $15,000." And he said, "Oh, okay. I thought," or he said, "You didn't say 50. That's what everyone else has been quoting us." Oh my God. Now, of course, I got the contract because I was so cheap. Like they were like, "How can we not work with her?" But I learned a lot from that. And I learned a lot about doing your research, understanding, how to charge clients that are of that size. Also, keep in mind what ad agencies are actually charging. Ad agencies are charging an arm and a leg for a lot of very junior people, or sometimes not many junior people, to work on a very big account. And I learned that working and subcontracting with them, and it shocked me. Now, I'm not saying you need to charge what they charge. And frankly, one of the reasons that the traditional ad agency is going away is because there's a lot of bloat in their pricing. However, you can probably charge more.
Yeah, that's just so true. Like the traditional agency, whether that's ad agency, marketing agency, whatever agency,
Hmm.
has an army of stuff that they put in your bill that does not contribute to the value that you're getting.
Nope.
They had
Nope. I
that.
mean,
They go ahead.
sorry, Ed, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Should I continue?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay.
You're
So, like, anyone who's worked in a traditional agency, and I'm going to just dump all over agencies, but anyone who's worked in a traditional agency, this is how it works. It's a bunch of 20 somethings. A new client comes in, everyone goes into the meeting room. We're all there. And of course, it's a great presentation. It's very slick. They've done a lot of work on it, certainly. When it comes to working the account, it is not that army of people who are working on it. It's usually someone who's very young, who is super overworked. Those environments are really the burn and churn type of work environments where they just, spit you out and get another one coming in. And they're charging an arm and a leg for you, right? Or for maybe a couple of you or three of you. And it's ridiculous, frankly, and it's, in my opinion, completely unethical. And I think that's why they're going the way of the dodo bird. But there's a huge opportunity for all of us to be paid fairly and handsomely for doing a really good job at what we do.
yeah, the markup these people put on sometimes interns. They hire
Oh, it's
interns and they just
unreal.
tell them what to do, and then they charge astronomical amounts of money for it that just go to their pockets.
Yep,
Or the ping pong machine, or the
right.
barista, or the huge office.
Well, think about it.
So
Agency like executives are making a half million, millions a year. Okay, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be paid well, but their employees are not, the people who are doing the work are not being paid like that. They are not. And that's where a lot of that money is going. And so, do you want to work to make someone else richer, or do you want to work to make yourself richer?
there you go. Um, All right. So you have also, I know that you have worked for a while. I don't know if this is still the case. You've been doing executive coaching, or
Yeah,
you've done executive coaching.
yeah.
Can you share a little bit of your experience doing that?
Yeah, sure. Part of my executive coaching work is really around working around these mindset issues of what actually holds people back. And we've sort of touched upon a lot of that today. A lot of what is holding you back is you. That's it. A lot of people, why don't they charge enough? Because they internally don't believe they're worth it, or because their mind has not been open to the possibilities of what they can charge. So, with coaching, what we're typically looking at doing is helping to build in three key areas: your confidence, your clarity of where you're going, and your courage to go do it, and giving you the roadmap to actually get it done.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So okay. So we're at 50 something minutes. I would like to take a little bit of time to talk about the many other ventures and endeavors
Right.
um, you're involved with.
What isn't Laura
So
doing?
you are also doing podcast
Yeah.
consulting. Um, can you talk about that
Yeah.
a little bit?
So, you know, this is a funny story, and this is really about how we can reinvent ourselves. So I started my marketing consultancy in 2013. By 2018, late 2018, I had started getting into doing more executive coaching and speaking, which was really something I was very passionate about, was speaking and helping individuals rise. And at the start of 2020, I said, you know what? In order to help build this speaking arm of my business, I'm going to build and create a podcast. Now, I've been doing content marketing for almost 20 years. So I know a thing or two about great storytelling. I knew enough about podcast production through some other things that I'd done. And I said, all right, I'm going to go do it. Well, within 2 months of putting this thing out, we hit 112 in Apple Podcast career section. The podcast is taking off without a huge list, without paid ads, and without spamming my friends endlessly. And then as the podcast is taking off, what else is happening? So this is about like beginning of March 2020. Well, my entire career in public speaking has imploded because COVID has hit. We're locked down. I'm not doing any more speaking. And I'm like, OMG. Like, what the heck is going on? And for a lot of us, we have been who, have survived the last year in business, it is extremely and has been extremely tough. And I feel for you if you have gone through these shifts. It is very tough. And so my speaking career is kind of on hold, and I'm doing the show, and the show's going really well. And then the show starts building me up more revenue in different ways through other speaking engagements that I start doing and through other consulting that I start doing. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I thought that you had to have millions of downloads and, 1,000 Patreon friends and all this stuff to make money with podcasting. And I'm starting to make money with podcasting, and I don't have any of that. And I start speaking about this, and people said, well, Laura, can you teach me how you've done this? How you've built additional revenue for your business and how you've actually built this podcast in, the pandemic, the next 100 years pandemic. And I said, sure, I can. And so that is the pivot I had to make. So I took my experience and, years of experience in content marketing, working for those brands like Intel, GE, and so forth. I took my experience now in podcast production, and I took my storytelling and marketing experience, and I just put them all together. And now I consult for other people doing that. So that's the story, Ed.
Connecting the dots.
Yeah. And it's not what I thought I'd be doing in 2021, but boy, do I love it. It really lights me up. So it's fun.
That's awesome. I can definitely tell that you enjoy doing podcasting and speaking. You're very easy to talk to, which is really awesome. And on top of that, you have the experience to share. So I think this is going to be a very helpful episode for everyone. So I want to thank you one more time for agreeing to come in on the podcast, for sharing your experience with the big clients and the bad guys and how to defend yourself. I think it's been pretty awesome. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
So if you'd like to go listen to my own show, it's called Brave by Design. You can find that wherever you go listen to podcasts. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Ed will put my name in the show notes. I'm sure you can, or it's probably in the description to this episode. You can go find me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in growing your own podcast and building revenue for your business podcast, visit podcastbrandlab.com and you can learn more about working with me.
All right. I'll make sure to add those 3 links in the show notes. Laura, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you around.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.